CEO of the Tourism Industry Council of South Australia. Before we start today's In Conversation, I'd like to acknowledge that that myself and Brenton and some others are participating in today's session from the land of the Kaurna people, and pay our respects to elders past and present and emerging, and also acknowledge traditional custodians of the lands that everyone else is on around the state. Obviously, our First Nations are fundamental to us as a society and very much so as an industry. Our In Conversation series are short webinars that provide business development opportunities and communications to great tourism operators, and many of you are out there today. And fortunately, with the Optus outage, there's some that will be watching the recording later on. And so just to re-emphasize that as well, that we are recording this session so people can view it afterwards. I would ask that, we'd love to have participation, we'd love to have people's comments and questions. Please do that via the chat, and please put your comment in there. I would ask that you keep your microphones on mute just to make sure that the audio is clear and everyone can participate. So today's In Conversation, we're really pleased to have a very much valued TIC-SA partner, Adelaide Airport, with us today. Aviation is so important to our industry. It facilitates and enables so much of the travel that people do to and through the state and around the state. It's fantastic that we've got Brenton with us here today, and we'll be able to delve a little bit more into Adelaide Airport, what their future vision is, aviation generally, and look at how South Australia we can make sure that we get the best opportunity, collaboration and coordination across the aviation sector with the tourism industry. As such, I'd now like to welcome Brenton Cox, Managing Director of Adelaide Airport. There's Brenton. Many of you would know Brenton. He was appointed Managing Director in 2021 and joined Adelaide Airport in 2013 after a diverse and varied career in Australia and overseas. Brenton, as introduction, please tell us a little bit about your journey to the seat that you're sitting in today.
G'day, Sean, and hi everyone. Look, aviation is just a wonderful industry. I've always loved exploring, but also love Adelaide and the local community. So I was looking for that, almost the impossible of being part of something that's internationally connected, but also, does something for our local community. I was lucky enough to be working in London, and at the time, it was actually Big Bad Macquarie. We bought Brussels Airport off the Belgian government, and at the time it was all, it was billions of dollars and numbers, and went over there though and saw 20,000 people at work, an entire country being served as a gateway, even despite the rail in Europe, and saw something that was actually kind of polarizing. Some people loved it, some people hated it, and the people that loved it had very good reason to. The people that hated it also had good reason to, and part of that was in part due to the way that the engagement of the airport had at that time with the community and with noise. So I just sort of fell in love with the impact that had, and at that point just sort of dreamed of being able to do so back in my hometown, and it was, almost 20 years later, have been given the blessing and the opportunity to be able to do so. Once the avgas is in the veins, Sean, it's pretty hard to get it out. So certainly enjoying the ride that we've got at the moment with our industry. It's never a dull moment.
Thanks, Brent. That's a great story. It's really impressive to hear you talk about your passion and why you are so passionate about aviation. Recently you were in the news with future plans and your annual report or the integrated review from last financial year was publicly announced, and there was a bit of media attention about it. I love and you've just touched on it. One thing that really impresses me about the airport is your purpose and vision, and the fact that your purpose is Adelaide Airport proudly connecting and shaping South Australia, and vision everyone's favourite airport, seamless, connected, easy. And as a TIC partner and an organisation that we work with you and your team at different intervals, you guys really live up to those aspirations, and they are big aspirations. And just wondering if you want to talk a little bit more about where the business is at and where you plan to take it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what do they say? You aim for the stars, you might reach the sky. But yeah, I mean, our role, it's easy to get overcomplicated. Our role, particularly in tourism, is pretty simple, right? Try to make it easy for people to get here, make it easy for while they're here, make sure there's a memorable first hello and last goodbye. And there's a lot of other stuff that goes around it, but that's fundamentally what it is. And it has been, the best thing about COVID has been the opportunity just to remind ourselves what we're here to do, and then how we're going to get better at doing it. And we had the benefit of getting all of our people together. So what you see there in that document, which everyone's pretty proud of, is captures our purpose, captures our vision. That was the work of all of our people. And coming out of COVID, the purpose bit's pretty obviously, we're here to proudly connect and shape South Australia. That's what we do. But the backdrop to that was that we'd imagined closing the airport during COVID because there are a number of our airside people that were catching COVID, being isolated. And if you can't run a safe and secure airfield, then you've got to shut, even though we've got legal obligations to remain open. And it was in the course of that some of the things that we do and take for granted came out. It was pretty obvious that there weren't people here for tourism. There weren't people coming here to study. People weren't visiting friends and relatives. There wasn't great sort of trade from an human investment sort of perspective, and no conferences. So that stuff was pretty obvious. But there was also the fact that if you have to shut us down, there's organ transplants, perishable freight, medical supplies, the mail to regional areas, different medical flights and freighters and emergency flights. All of those things sort of stopped. So our people sort of sat back and went, wow, that's scary to imagine a world where that doesn't happen, but also quite cool that that's what we come to work for every day and make happen. And every single one of our people's chosen to live in the community that this business gets to serve. So that bit was really good. And vision is hard, because part of that's imagining a world a long way down the track. And quite frankly, just getting stuff done properly now is probably more important than ever. But it's still the benefit of that guiding light over the horizon. It's just to give a sense for people when you're walking, that there's a sense of where that walking in a direction is towards, even though it might be a long way away. And at its very highest level, we actually do want to be everyone's favourite airport. It sounds a bit, it takes a little while to get used to, because on one level it's bold, the other it might be a little sycophantic perhaps, but we have a brand ethos of being wanting to be seamless, connected and easy. That's always been our brand ethos. It's connected into a lot of what people find rich and enjoyable about Adelaide and South Australia, and that's what we as an airport want to be known as. But we also know that people's expectations just keep getting higher, quite rightly, and that we need to constantly be looking ahead to imagine what those expectations will be and look to meet and exceed them. And so being everyone's favourite airport doesn't necessarily mean having to be the best on any individual measure. Something like a Changi airport with a dual and what it does, because of the whole economy has been cross-subsidised by Changi as a hub, is something that, we shouldn't ever compare ourselves to. But being each of our individual stakeholders' favourite airport in the way that they interact with us is what we want to be. And our people spent a lot of time doing this. We imagine the songs, the movies, all the things that might resonate. And at that moment, I actually hadn't watched Love Actually except back when it was made, and people started talking about that again too, because it was just about creating a lot of those individual moments and never forgetting that that's really what we're here to do. There's a whole lot of things that are going to change over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. So many changes, but at its core, we have a job to do about serving our customers and serving the people of South Australia in that way, and constantly trying to be better at doing it. And sorry to keep going there, Sean, if the way that we tried to imagine it was, what are the things we need to achieve to tick the box for all of our stakeholders? The first is a complete aviation network. People want to go non-stop to different destinations, and we can probably talk about that in a bit more in a minute. We've got to be a logistics economic powerhouse, just from the freight perspective. People want to be part of a connected campus on airport. We've got huge amounts of aviation related tenants here, and we need to make their life easy. We do try to make the airport as a destination in its own right, sort of showcasing the best of South Australia. That's something we want to keep doing, and obviously offering seamless journeys, and that will always change too. So we've mapped all of those things back to all of our key, all of our stakeholders. We think if we can be those things, we'll also be everyone's favourite airport.
Yeah, no, that's great, Brenton. Appreciate the explanation, because I think, I've travelled quite a bit, and Adelaide Airport's a fantastic airport. I don't want to be cliche, but it's absolutely my favourite airport as well. And I think one of the things that's really cool about Adelaide Airport is it's so close to the CBD. You don't have to spend an hour in the taxi. You can, and that's an external factor, but the fact, I think you could almost say seamless, connected, easy. That's what we want South Australia to be as well. And so you're living the brand to a degree, not just at business level, but at state level too.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, 2 runway lengths from the city, and that's a blessing and a curse. We think it's significantly a blessing for those convenience factors, and that the curfew addresses the downside of having residents that could be concerned about being close to an airport. But it's absolutely a competitive advantage for our state.
Hmm. So the plans for the future, you've got the plans go out to 2050. And I know some media reports were saying that you've just come off the back of a $200 million expansion with the terminal, and particularly with international arrivals and departures. But there's no slowing up. The business is spending and looking at further expansions in the medium, short, and long term. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, Sean, and I mean, especially given that there's still a lot to do right now, and that's what can be concerning at times, is that you've got to look forward and imagine the future, otherwise you can't prepare for it. But also, we've got some pretty fundamental things to do. We're trying to get more dots on maps. We're investing in capacity ahead of time. We've got to continue to enhance our customer service, and there's a lot of people in our ecosystem that still aren't at full strength, and we're just trying to help bring up to the level. But there's also going to be a lot of changes, right? There's a lot of things happening out there that we have to be ready for. The good thing is that, despite, I guess, what you read in the news, people want to explore. They want to get together, and actually the world's getting wealthier, even though a lot of the focus is on geopolitical tensions and conflict and impending recessions. But the world is wealthier and desiring to be more connected, and there's more travel that comes from that. Asia in particular, on our doorstep, and that's where we're seeing probably the biggest shift in that demand and our demographic and our target market. Southeast Asia on our doorstep. There's changes to technology, and we've spoken about this for a while, and we're seeing it now as new aircraft come in with Dreamliners and 350s, and much longer range, more fuel efficient, more economical. And then addition on the fuel side, South Australia has the opportunity to be central to our shift towards more sustainable aviation fuels. And I don't think we've fully appreciated or grasped the significance of what needs to happen there and how we have the opportunity to have a leading role as well. That'll be really important. And then it's hard to even start where technology will play, because it's almost like there'll be more automation, but travel will also be more personal, that benefiting from some of the personalization that data and information can have. But there's of course going to be a role for AI and predicting and utilizing data and immersive technologies and just imagining things happening before they're actually occurred. Biometrics will be really important. Some of those nasty processes, and autonomous vehicles will play a role sort of both behind the scenes, below the wing, but also in people's lives to and from the airport. There'll be a lot more self-servicing, but our people are also going to play a more important role than ever, because we don't see humans not wanting to have human interactions any less in the future than they do now. Everything's so focused on how technology is going to change things, but everyone ultimately wants a friendly face. People are traveling for connections too, and you want the optionality. Sometimes some people, or on some days, they almost just don't want a human connection. They just want to be in their own little box. And other times they're out and just craving it, and we need to be able to provide that. And so our constant investment in our people on that journey will be important. But the change in the face of the customer will be quite big, because currently 2/3 of our customer base in Adelaide are Adelaideans, and we're expecting that by 2050 it'll have flipped the other way, and 2/3 will be coming from elsewhere in the world, or non-resident in Adelaide. So, and in that, currently we're sort of underweight tourism for a reason for travel. We are expecting that we'll be able to start to capture more of our market share. So reasons for travel, tourism will start to increase. So not only will there be greater volumes overall, more people coming from elsewhere, there'll be more proportion of those people coming for tourism, and at least in line with national averages. So that's sort of the backdrop, Sean, without even talking about necessarily what we might do to accommodate all of that. There's some of the themes that are out there. Do you want me to talk about the network? And that's often where some people find it most interesting. Where the dots on maps going to be.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting there. I've asked you an infrastructure question. You actually answered it by a future, these are our future customers, and understanding a future customer will dictate how the bricks and mortar and things like that. So that's really great to hear that the business is so focused on the customer, not necessarily the physical, obviously the infrastructure follows the customer in terms of their wants and needs. And so it's really insightful to hear you talk like that,
Yes.
Brenton.
Oh no, I'm glad. Funny you say it. We've got a really big planning infrastructure team, and what we do is always imagine what do people need, and then once we identify that, how are they going to use it, and when you're dealing in volume, simplicity and ease is really important, and that's why our brand DNA, both in our vision, also influences how we plan infrastructure, and then how we develop and deliver infrastructure. So, perhaps I can talk about that infrastructure in short. In the next 5 years, spending $1 billion, that's a lot of money. Probably 60% of that's going to be in core aviation infrastructure. So, we can go down in more detail if you like, but our check-in hall, our security operation has to significantly expand. New technology, we've run out of space. Aircraft parking, lots of tarmac, completely resheeting our runway. It's really expensive. Expanding our piers north and south. So we've just had $200 million on terminal expansion, but we have to keep going. and there's even more to happen. And probably one of the more interesting, despite it might appear boring from an infrastructure perspective, is on our roads and some of our drop off and pick up. So that's the first interaction that people have, is when they arrive curbside, and we'll be changing that up somewhat as well. So $1 billion is a lot. We haven't spent, in the next 5 years, we'll have more projects than we've ever had. We've traditionally, we built the terminal in 2005, and that was open then. Then we had a fairly low period of development, and then in COVID we managed to deploy $200 million on the terminal expansion. Because that terminal now, it's still wonderful, but it's sort of reached its initial planning life. It's at this point we just have to now just continually grow, and just get ahead of the curve.
Oh, no, that's great. No, fantastic. And then that quick snapshot was really good, Brenton. Yeah, like and going back to your point there, dots on the map. Yeah, people are fascinated. Tourism industry, obviously, there's many tourism businesses joining us today, and they look after global customers, and you know 99% of those global customers come to them via the airport. How are you seeing the build back domestically and internationally in terms of access, frequency, and potentially future route opportunities?
Yeah, domestically's back where it was before COVID, from a volume perspective. Not necessarily completely from an experience perspective, but in terms of travel volumes and largely connectivity. What we're missing, in fact, our domestic network map's never been broader, but we're missing a few of those off-peak frequencies, and people are flying more in the peak. So our peaks have never been peakier, but our off-peaks have never been quieter. That's not a great recipe in infrastructure world, but at least people are back traveling domestically, so that's good. And even regionally, never had more travel despite having much less capacity, because Rex in particular has had some well publicised resource constraints. So it just means those regional planes are pretty full, and same goes for the domestic flying. Internationally, we've had this incredible ramp up. I mean, Australia was the last country, one of the last places in the world to open, and of significance. And so it meant that we were one of the last countries to actually get capacity deployed. But we are starting to see some of those capacity constraints come away. And even in our last quarter, we were at 87% of international volumes compared to FY19. So that's better than we thought we'd be, certainly better than we'd forecast to be, which is good. And the market changes within that are really interesting. I mean, starting from our airlines, we don't have Cathay, we don't have China Southern. I mean, the China market is only 30% recovered. And, Sean, you and I are talking about before, it just feels like there'll be a bit of a slingshot. And I went to, as soon as the borders opened with China earlier this year, I was there. Never been more welcomed. Everyone wanted to come to Australia, wanted to come to Adelaide. They were just waiting for that quiet nod to tell them it was time to do so. It was an interesting dynamic. It's not something I'd experienced firsthand before, but it does feel like there's a real opportunity. But right now, there is no one from China coming here, nor Hong Kong. That market's virtually gone. What we've seen instead is India, which is a third higher than it's ever been. It's just been absolutely incredible. And again, was in India there trying to encourage Indian carriers. And the message was sort of simple. It was, yeah, Australia's great. But most of all, it's really easy to get a visa to Australia. It's really hard to get one to Europe, UK, Ireland, US. But we got a visa to Australia electronically in 24 hours. It can take months in other places. So you've made it easy, and we're coming here. And that was interesting because, sometimes we sort of focus a lot on our product, which is the thing that we control, but then there's some other things out there that can make a massive difference. And to be honest, we've been propped up by India, and that's been one of the reasons that you've seen a couple of new carriers in our market, Batik Indonesia, Batik Malaysia, a lot of the indirect flows are coming from India. And so we are seeing some of those markets turn on. Europe, we're down 30%. US is down 30%. So those real traditional markets just have not come back yet. We've really relied on Asia outside of China to sort of, it's really the first to come back online. A lot of that's visiting friends and relatives too, which some of those people end up being tourists. They just don't quite often spend as much as your dedicated leisure traveller. So it's really hard to look through and see exactly how these dynamics are going to change. But what is clear is that move that we always expected to see towards Asia is certainly occurring on the recovery.
It'll be fascinating. In the chat, I can see Ian Muller, I think General Manager, Bridgeport Hotel there at Murray Bridge, has put a comment there about infrastructure. Maybe just quickly circle back to that one, Brenton. And I think there's previously been some discussions about light rail options into the airport, into the CBD. Is there anything around that sort of thinking in the 2050 vision?
Yeah, we've got a rail corridor that we've kept, and in our vision, we've kept it there. We would really like that. It's not something that we would ourselves build between the airport and the city. There's been lots of previous infrastructure planning conversations around it. We certainly would encourage it. It'd offer a fabulous alternative mode of transport, mostly for the people that work here. There's 10,000 people that come to work here every day, and not many people are able to take public transport. So having the tram would be great. What you often see, though, unfortunately, elsewhere in the world, you really need to get to a really large scale until it starts to become something that works in a standalone sense for your traveller. But it still is an excellent alternative offer, and we'd like to see that happen. I mean, in the past, we've been pretty close to seeing light rail come down Henley Beach Road, down Airport Road, straight in and plugged into close to where the airport hotel is. And yeah, we definitely like to see that. It financially is quite a difficult proposition, particularly for balance sheet constrained governments at the moment. But by 2050, I'd like to think some form of, I don't know if it's going to be light rail then, but some form of just really known predictive transport that connects Adelaide with the CBD. I mean, there's definitely going to be other things like VTOL, vertical lift-off transport, but I think even in 30 years' time, sometimes that might not be, it may still be too expensive for the average person, and having that mass transport light rail equivalent, we'd love to have it.
Great, thanks, Brenton. Sandy Edwards has posted a comment and a question, just really appreciating the information you're providing. And security, it's obviously an ongoing issue that you're managing. And with the new security arrangements that the federal government are implementing, with some of those new scanners and things like that, how do you see that issue playing out? And she's put a point here about leaving laptops and phones in bags. And I think with those new scanners, you can, the old scanners, you can't. Obviously, it's something you're looking at. Can you comment on that, Brenton?
This is one of the major things here and now. And yeah, so all of the new kit, computer topography, it's like CT scanners. When you get a CT scan at hospital, you're able to leave your laptops in for that. Now, we're in this very awkward position of having some of our equipment that's new, some old. And the reason for that is we've run out of space. And we've actually even taken back all the space that we can now without moving check-in desks, without actually moving baggage halls underneath. There's actually a whole lot of activity that's going on under the floor there that you can't see. And injector belts from check-in go in there. So we're now up against that. We just do not have the space. And you might actually see there's this, I don't like it, but better than not having it, is a little dog leg security queue off to the right that we open in peak times. That's through former office space that we've reclaimed. We now need to do a lot more to expand that out, and that's going to be starting next year. It'll be during live operations, so staging that out in a way that can keep and ensure that people's journeys remain as seamless as possible is going to be a challenge, and the team is working really hard to do that, and we'll explain exactly how that will happen next year before we start. But once that's done, it'll all be one piece of equipment, and yes, you'll be able to keep your technology in those bags. Security is always going to be one of those things that is a necessary part of the process. No one really likes it. It's covering for that infinitesimally small possibility of someone nefarious ruining it for everyone. But that is part of the process. It's September 11. It has been, it will continue to be. We're hoping that as technology continues to improve, you've got to keep ahead of the bad guys, of course, but that some of those experiences will be better. Once we've got one piece of tech all in one spot with a greater security throughput and volume, we think that experience will be better. In peak times, there's not an airport on the planet where there are not wait times and peak times. Our worst period of time is around 5 o'clock on a Monday morning. In fact, around 5 a.m. on most mornings is where you have a degree of queuing. Some mornings it can just be a few minutes, but on the busiest days, you get between 10 to 20 minutes worth of queues. In the scheme of things, on a benchmark basis, that's a fabulous maximum queue time, but it's equally not a queue time we're happy with. So that's one of the things as well with part of the expansion that we're working on. Right now, there actually isn't sufficient space to get the most efficient sort of queuing and also preparation for those security processes as we'd like. The other thing is that because probably some of the actual flying and passenger presentation is less predictable. Historically, patterns of aviation were very predictable. It was very easy to know exactly when waves of people would come and go. That's much more difficult. And so what you're then having to do is, of course, match rosters of people up to that demand. So that's harder. In addition, you've got in our security operation, around about 70% of those people have been working in that operation for less than a year. In addition, there's new processes, new equipment, increased regulation that they're also having to get used to. So you can imagine it's a particularly bit of a pressure cooker environment for them, and add in added degrees of absenteeism. Some of that is directly COVID related. Some of that is just a little bit of perhaps a change in behaviour that we've seen. People are more likely to sort of have a sick day than they used to before COVID. So trying to match rosters to less predictable demand is currently more challenging, but we've got a lot of work to do, including trying to leverage a little bit more predictive technology to try to take into account some of these changes of behavior, changes in demand, changes in also supply. Some of our airlines are also having these exact same issues, and predictability of when flights is also more difficult. That'll just get better and better and better. We're hoping what you see and feel now is as bad as it's going to be from here on in. And I religiously look at our security queue wait times, and even when I'm going there myself, a 10-minute queue feels long, but thankfully it's only a 10-minute queue. It can just look and feel bad. And as for something we want to get ourselves to the position of being, we're actually not, I'll be honest, bold enough to do it yet, is to be able to publish existing and forecast security wait times. The danger of that is that you don't want to lead people astray. And once we're through this build and laying out all the new equipment, and we've got probably additional investment in predictive technology, and the workforce is much more experienced, then that's the sort of additional layers of customer experience that we're looking to be able to lay out over the coming few years.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brenton. That's a really great insight into what's going on behind the scenes. Federico's got a question about regional aviation. Obviously, as you alluded to previously, Rex has expanded, particularly in their interstate flights, and recently, I think, launched their Adelaide-Brisbane flights. What does regional aviation look like now and into the future? Our regions are so important to our offering as a state, and regional aviation is sometimes a challenging space.
Yeah, look, there's a bit of recovery of capability to come back in, and just pilot training, aircraft maintenance cycles, really basic things that take quite a bit of time to line up. Connectivity between the key regional cities is okay, but it could be better. Port Lincoln is doing really well. We'd love to have a bit more capacity to other places, particularly Kangaroo Island. Whyalla connectivity has been okay too, and you'd expect a little bit more there given the level of activity. We're also seeing lots of flying to where mining's going pretty well. Olympic Dam, Carrapateena. There's actually quite a lot of regional mining activity. One of the dynamics that will change, so that look in the short term, we'll just see those alleviation of capacity constraints within our airline customers that will help bring back some of that capacity. Over the longer term, what will be very interesting will be aircraft technology and how that will change things up. And when it comes to electric aircraft, we say eVTOLs, and that sounds fancy. They're basically mini electric helicopters. And that is going to be very interesting when you be able to imagine people coming in on larger flights, domestic and internationally, and then be able to connect off to smaller modes of transport. That's not going to be very widespread in the next decade, but I think in the decades coming, that will, I think, revolutionise the ability to travel to regional destinations where it'll be quite cost effective to be able to fly and timely with the type of technology that's going to come on. That's going to be the biggest, I think, most exciting change over the decades to come.
Wow, sounds fascinating. Brendan, I know time's pressing. I've got one last one for you before I wrap up. And if anyone's got any other questions, please post them. The federal government's come out with the aviation green paper. Obviously, these green papers, which then become white papers, these opportunities don't happen that often. TIC-SA, we've asked our members for comments, and we'll be putting in a submission into that. You touched on, there's many things in the green paper. You touched on visa opportunities and how one of the barriers is at times is visa processes, and how it's a competitive advantage for us. People can get visas with 24 hours online. That's phenomenal. I recently went to get a visa myself to travel to China, and it was phenomenal to go through that process. So if people are having that sort of barrier coming to us, obviously sometimes there's good reasons, and regulation is a good thing. But are there any areas that you sort of think, as tourism industry operators and TIC-SA specifically, we should be having a look at this green paper and feeding into the federal government consultation process?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine there's lots of sort of more technical aviation areas that we'll focus on insofar as is relevant to tourism. I think it's always good to provide support and remind government of the importance of investing federally in Tourism Australia. They're kind of our brand spearhead. We are a long way away. We are not insignificant by any means, but it's very easy to be forgotten when you're on the edge of the earth, and we're quite expensive to get here, and that you've got to spend money on brand awareness. So I think it's at any opportunity always worth reminding and giving politicians the support, I guess, knowing that they have the political support to continuing to invest hard in Tourism Australia and also the state-based tourism authorities. And while this is a federal piece of aviation industry review, I think that's all. It's also relevant for our state to be able to make sure that just remind people of the importance of investing in tourism, importance of brand Australia, brand South Australia. Yet there are layers of regulation that impact travel, and you touched on a really important one. Just making it easy for people when they think about coming here to go, right, how am I going to do that? It starts with how am I actually going to legally make it into the country? And we traditionally have made that very, very hard. And people have come here regardless, but it's an even more competitive landscape. It's ruthlessly competitive. And our OECD places that can also sell, safe, green, interesting, vibrant travel. They're stripping back some of those restrictions, and we should be able to do so while maintaining the relevant key controls. I think promoting, the paper card that you all fill out, it's just a funny little quaint quirk. Let's just make that digital, make everything as seamless and easy as possible. And I think there are always points to make in these green paper industry reviews, and I'd urge those opportunities. We also will encourage government to be thinking about sustainable aviation fuels to help that transition. I think it's a massive industry opportunity, massive economic opportunity, particularly for South Australia. We've got more sustainable renewable energy sources that's more cost effective than anywhere else on the mainland and many other places and on the entire planet. We clearly have chosen to invest in hydrogen, which will see us be a leader there. So sustainable aviation fuel, if we can help make that transition as seamless as possible, we'll be a leader to almost, you can imagine, think about how much money Middle Eastern countries make from oil, or all the oil majors. In the future, that's going to be replaced by other fuel sources. Why shouldn't we be that country? It'll only happen, unfortunately, because you'd love for private enterprise to make it all happen on their own, but it will only happen if our government does make it easy for us. So I'd urge that as also another layer, because again, if people can't come here, or people choosing to shame a destination for inability to travel in a sustainable way, then it's the best product in the world is going to find it hard to thrive and grow. So it's a very rare opportunity. It's only the second in my career in Australia. I remember going through an aviation green and white paper process. So yeah, don't take it lightly. I think you'll also see some activity on the affordability of travel and some of those pieces there. I think that's also always worth working points around. And thank you, Sean, for raising that and the interest in that topic, because if aviation works well, that I always like to refer to some of the research that SATC has done, and the two biggest drivers of tourism. Number one are the economies of source markets, disposable incomes of source markets. Number two is connectivity, in this aviation connectivity. So let's make sure that works really well.
Thanks, Brent. That's great. So I it's interesting what I heard you say there as one, invest in, Tourism Australia. Two, visa process, make it easy for people to be able to get here. And three, aviation fuel and the biofuel opportunity. I was at a ATEC conference last week, and there was a dinner where we looked at aviation, and that was one of the things that was highlighted. And wouldn't it be amazing if Adelaide, South Australia, was home to Australia's bio appropriate eco? I'm not quite sure what the words are, but this clearly aviation is looking at its carbon footprint, and a fuel source that delivers much better outcomes is an opportunity for our industry. And wouldn't it be great if Adelaide South Australia was a home of that industry? Um, and it's funny as well, Brenton, every time we ask our members, obviously we primarily work in the state space. What's the number one thing that state government should invest in? In my 8 years, every time we ask the members, it's always the same answer. It's destination marketing. And you've just said that for Australia. The investment in tourism Australia is incredibly important. So we absolutely align there as well. There's one more comment here. What are the future plans for the airport precinct outside of airport growth? So obviously you have a lot of other stakeholders and tenants that participate in and utilise the land that you have. Brenton, do you just want to maybe quickly touch on that one, and then I'll wrap today's session up?
Yeah, I mean, of that $1 billion, 40% of that's going to be going towards non-core aviation build, and some of it we've already announced that we're working towards. We've got lots of different precincts that we have tenants that have good reason to want to be there, and possibly in the tourism space that'll be really exciting, and I think will pull people into Adelaide will be if we can get this wave park off the ground. That'll be an amazing little addition there in the West Beach, connecting on with West Beach Parks. We think that people will come from all over Australia, potentially elsewhere in the world, to come and experience that. So that would be lovely, and it will link in to almost that more recreational precinct. We've got Harbour Town, AFL Max. We're also talking to a few other interesting future tenants that I can't talk about at the moment, but it would all pull together really nicely in this sort of leisure and wellbeing precinct. We're very close. While space as a federal investment, that federal funding, $1.4 billion, was axed in the last budget. South Australia still does have fleet, and that's small satellite manufacturing. So we're looking forward to trying to make Adelaide Airport home to fleet and link in with lots of other interesting like-minded tenants of that ilk too. There's of course logistics as well. So we've called it Airport East. It's a future junction between aviation and then the way that people rely upon goods to serve their everyday, whether it's imports or exports, and or even just e-commerce and bring in packages that are ordered. There's a huge amount of development that has to go on there, so that whole connection between passengers and goods that are coming to and from off airport and then getting in the belly of aircraft work really seamlessly. So yeah, there's quite a bit to there. Unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of our non-aviation property type deals, you can't really talk about them until the deals are done. But the good thing is there's a really incredibly exciting pipeline of opportunity as well that'll come in the more broader precinct. So that it is exciting. So no, thanks for the question on that.
No, thanks, Brent. That's really good. The wave park sounds amazing, and connecting it in with West Beach and what happens there, that leisure precinct sounds like that could be really exciting in coming years. That brings us to an end. Is there any final comments you'd like to make, Brenton?
Oh, look, just that our industry is being remade, and it's probably an investment in our people that's the most profound, Sean. There's a whole new bunch of people that are experiencing this industry, and that is just beautiful, watching the development of that team, and they're the people that are going to bring the vision that we have to life. And at the moment, they're watching some of those human connections that people were missing for a few years come back, and I just think that's the best thing. As I sit in my role at the moment, looking at all these new people just experience a wonderful industry and develop and grow and bring our vision to life, it's a really good time.
That's brilliant. And 10,000 people work at the airport. I didn't know that. So it's a very big business and the precinct that you look after. Thank you so much for your candor and the information you've provided today. What you're doing there is brilliant, Brendan, and your purpose and vision, just you guys really live and breathe that. And thank you for what you do for the travel and tourism industry and how you really have an aspiration to deliver great customer experiences and a wonderful South Australian, what part of a wonderful South Australian trip, which is certainly something we're all passionate about as well. Thanks everyone for attending today's session. Well, we have recorded it, so those people that haven't been able to connect live will be able to watch it. Really appreciate the time that people take to connect and look at what the opportunities are for the greater good. Please, if you have any other thoughts around the aviation green paper, please email us at info@ticsa.com.au. We'll be compiling a response and putting that through into the federal government process to represent tourism businesses here in SA. So thanks everyone. Have a great day and look forward to you next time when we see you in our In Conversation series. Thanks again, Brendan. See ya.
Sure, thank you.